10 verbal triggers that create instant sexual tension. With women's sexual tension isn't created by charm or surface-level compliments or textbook flirting tactics that most men rely on, with predictable results that often fall flat or feel rehearsed. Instead, it's triggered by how your words make a woman feel uncertain, observed, and emotionally exposed in a way that makes her feel like you're reading her deeper than she allows most people to. That's the real power most men never tap into because they're too focused on validation, approval, and performance. Instead of perception, nuance, and framing, what high-value men deeply understand is this: women do not respond to what you say in a logical vacuum. They respond to the psychological frame. You deliver your words from meaning. Your energy, intent, and unspoken confidence are far more important than the literal meaning of your words. You're not trying to impress her like every other guy who thinks approval is the gateway to attraction. You're pressing on her subconscious vulnerabilities and hidden emotional loops that most men don't even know exist. These 10 verbal triggers aren't small talk or generic pickup lines. They're psychological precision tools, and once you use them with calibration, grounded presence, and emotional control, the game doesn't just shift, it changes forever. 1. You didn't expect me to notice that, did you? This line flips the traditional interactional dynamic. It subtly places you as the observer and her as the one being observed, analyzed, even studied. Women are used to being in control of the social frame, especially when they're attractive, but this line slices right through that control and flips the spotlight from an evolutionary standpoint. When a woman feels seen beyond the surface, it creates an inner shift. She's not used to someone catching the microsignals and unconscious behaviors she thought were invisible. It sparks tension not because it's aggressive, but because it feels penetrating emotionally. You use this when she makes a slip-up, reveals a tell, or says something slightly inconsistent with her persona. It reminds her she's not running this interaction fully. You are, and that sense of exposure triggers the ancient wiring in her brain that associates keen male perception with survival, dominance, and reproductive advantage. It says, I'm watching more closely than anyone else. I'm not distracted by your looks or words. I'm tuned in to the deeper current. And that realization is rare and deeply disarming to interesting choice of words. At face value, this sounds neutral, even polite, but it carries a heavy psychological weight because it shifts her out of autopilot communication into sudden self-awareness. Most conversations follow scripts, but this line disrupts that script by calling attention to how she spoke, not what she said. Women process language more emotionally than men do. They calibrate their tone, their inflection, and phrasing to manage emotional outcomes and maintain control over their image. When you call attention to her delivery, you're indirectly suggesting that something leaked out beneath her mask. That subtle interruption in her flow creates micro-vulnerability. She starts replaying her words, recalibrating, wondering why you picked up on it and what it meant. That's not criticism, it's psychological dominance through presence and perceptiveness. You become the guy who listens between the lines, and that pulls her into your psychological orbit where she's no longer fully in control but compelled to earn back your mental and emotional attention. 3. You don't usually say that to just anyone, do you? This line introduces subtle skepticism, masked in charm, and it creates an emotional loop. She can't easily close it, questions her intent, her uniqueness, and her patterns. In evolutionary psychology, one of the key filters women use to select high-status males is selectivity. They instinctively test for men who aren't easily impressed. This line flips that script by implying she might be the one who isn't selective enough. The effect is profound. She begins to feel exposed, as if she overstepped or revealed too much too quickly. That triggers a deep-rooted fear of being seen as basic or unoriginal, and now she has to work harder to prove that she's different, that she's worth your deeper attention. You've reversed the validation structure without confrontation. You've made her question her social value in your eyes, and that tension is magnetically charged because it invites performance and self-correction, not comfort. For I like how you said that, like you meant it. This line masquerades as a compliment. But it's a trap because it links her words to intentional emotion. You're forcing her to own her statement by implying there was passion, weight, or authenticity behind it. Now she has to decide, was that genuine or was I just talking? And regardless of what she chooses, that internal questioning activates emotional investment, because now her image and credibility are on the line. When someone feels like their words have weight and are being listened to with intent, they unconsciously step up their performance and become more reactive and emotionally calibrated. This builds friction. She's suddenly not just talking, she's performing under the gaze of a man who sees intent behind her tone. And that level of presence makes your interaction memorable, even haunting. 5. You ever wonder why you're drawn to certain people? This is a pure introspection trigger, and it's devastatingly effective in shifting the tone from casual to emotional depth. It's not just a question, it's an invitation to self-analyze while in your presence. The moment she reflects, she begins to create associations, and you become central in that. Reflection now, you're not just a guy talking to her, you're the man who made her think deeper than usual, and that creates a neural link between you and her sense of self-awareness. Women crave emotional mirroring, especially from men who show psychological depth. This line turns you into that mirror. It's soft but powerful because it makes her feel like the emotional connection is real, and that she's discovering something about herself with you as the catalyst. 6. That reaction says a lot more than you think. Most men are chasing certainty and clear answers. High-value men thrive in ambiguity because ambiguity breeds obsession and interpretive curiosity. This line introduces that uncertainty. You're telling her there's more meaning in her behavior than she consciously realizes, but you're not giving her the answer. That ambiguity forces her into a decoding loop, and she keeps thinking about what she might have revealed. The female brain is wired for social interpretation and emotional analysis. That's why when you plant a thought she can't fully define, she becomes psychologically glued to solving it, and, by extension, more invested in you. 7. You're not as in control as you think, are you? This line targets the illusion of emotional control. Women often pride themselves on being able to steer conversations subtly and maintain upper hand in emotional exchanges. This line strips that sense of control away in one smooth, psychological jab. Loss aversion kicks in. She feels she's slipping and wants to regain power, but to do that, she must re-engage on your frame. The emotional tension this creates is addictive because she suddenly needs to prove to herself and you that she's still composed and calibrated, but now she's playing by your rules in every word she says next. Becomes a subconscious effort to reclaim the balance she feels she lost. 8. That wasn't the answer I expected. Here's where you challenge without rejecting. You're signaling that she surprised you, but not necessarily in a good or bad way. This neutrality drives curiosity and creates an opportunity for her to deepen her response to meet your unspoken standard. This taps into the psychological need to be understood deeply. When you hint that her first layer wasn't satisfying, you're saying, I think there's more beneath your surface, and I'm only here for what's real. This draws out depth and authenticity because you're pushing her into a space most people don't ask her to go emotionally, and now the conversation feels alive, not just social. 9. You're actually kind of dangerous when you talk like that. This is where tension turns erotic. You're attaching emotional volatility to her behavior in a way that's playful but heavy with implication. You're not saying you're attracted. You're saying she's stirring something up that feels wild, unregulated, risky, and thrilling. That kind of emotional charge forces her to pay more attention to how she's being perceived and whether her behavior is pushing your buttons or pulling you in. It's a polarity bomb. You remain grounded while suggesting that she brings the chaos, and that unpredictability triggers arousal, especially when she can't measure the exact effect she's having on you. 10. You notice how this energy shifts when you're around. This is your nuke, because it repositions her identity inside a shared emotional field. You're not complimenting her. You're pointing out a tangible atmospheric shift that happens. When she walks into the space, it speaks to her unconscious impact, and that idea is incredibly seductive to a woman because it makes her feel emotionally influential without needing to act or try the power. Here is in the subtle elevation. You're describing what her presence does, not just to you, but to the entire dynamic in the room, and because you're doing it calmly and observationally, not with flattery, she begins to see herself differently through your eyes. That kind of rare mirrored awareness is addictive because it's not accessible to her with most men, and once she feels that kind of field-level reflection, she craves your presence just to feel that reflection again.